All right, welcome back to Series 14. If you haven't been following along, it's best to start at the beginning to get an understanding of what's going on. You still can watch the videos, but a lot of things from the previous series will be talked about in the next series as we're going forward, just to keep the series going moving forward. So other than that, we're gonna get started in Bereshith, which is Genesis. We're still in chapter 25. We see that Sarah died. They found another wife. We talk about the kids that Abraham had. We see that Abraham gave Yishak all that he had, and the sons of the concubines that he had, Abraham had. We see that he gave gifts to them and not the same as Abraham. So we see the difference in treatment between Yishak and the other sons. So with the other sons they had, it talks about what was going to happen with them. But we'll see that when we get talking about on the men section. So, but just remember that these other women has had children. Now in verse 9, we're going to start here. And his sons, Yishak and Yishmael, buried him in the cave of Machpelah, which is before Mamre, in the field of Ephron, son of Teshohar, the Hittite, the field which Abraham purchased from the sons of Heth. There Abraham was buried with Sarah, his wife. All right, so they say he was buried with Sarah, his wife. All right, so they were buried in the same spot. That may be important as well. It talks about where he was buried. There's still one, and they put him in the same. So if you go to funerals, you know where people are buried at. You see a lot of times the husband and wife are married in the same spot because like they're one and the same. So that's key. That's important. If you don't have a lot of family members and you're married and something happens like that, you want to let them know you want to be buried where your spouse was buried. If you're a Christian, follow along here. But other than that, verse 12, and this is the genealogy of Ishmael, Abraham's son, whom Hagar, the Mizraim, Sarah's female servant, bore to Abraham. So this is key here. You want to check out the genealogy, just mainly the lineage of Ishmael. It talks about that in the next verses, so you can read the whole chapter to find that out. Hagar again is brought up, the Mizraim, Sarah's female servant. Remember, if you go back to the previous years where we talk about Sarah told Abraham about the idea of having his lineage come through Hagar. That's not what God said or planned, and he listened to his wife. So that's key there as well. So we're going to go down to verse 20, important to women again. And Yishak was 40 years old when he took Ribkah as wife, the daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean of Paddan Aram, the sister of Laban, the Aramean. All right, so we see here, talks about how old Yishak was. He was 40 years old when he took Rebekah as his wife. So now, God's timing is not our timing. Remember that. Some may be single in their 30s. They're thinking that they should have got married earlier, things like that. That's going to be key. So maybe it's meant for you to wait in Christianity if you're following God, serving God, to find your wife. All right. It's going to take a lot for you to learn before you can get mature enough to have a wife. Right. Just like in schooling and things like that, they don't put you in the career field right away. You go through schooling, you get training and things like that, and then you're ready to, do entry level work. And then it takes more years and experience before you get to that professional level, right? So that's key. The daughter of Bethuel, the Aramean. All right, so it talks about that. Find out who he is. The sister of Laban. All right, remember Laban? All right, so you can go back and find out about that. But as we continue on, verse 21, and Yishak prayed to, we have the name of God right here, for his wife because she was barren. And we have the name of God right here, answer his prayer, and Rivkah, his wife, conceived. All right, this is a key point right here. If you're reading, this kind of tells you what's going on if you don't know the words. That's another way you can find out what's going on. It says she was barren. So if you don't know that definition right there or what that word means, you can look it up. But if you read a little further, it says that, and we have the name of God right there, answer his prayer, and Rivkah, his wife, conceived. So, 40 years old, remember, he immediately took her in his mother's tent to know his wife, and he loved her. Some time has passed, and she still doesn't have a kid. She's barren, right? And then immediately after praying, see, he got God involved. He didn't just go in and say, hey, let me find another woman, have a kid through her, and things like. It's not talking about that right now. What's happening is he prayed directly to God, asking for a child, and God delivered, and he conceived. He got a child. So he got a child from God. So there's different ways in marriages. If you're not praying when you're trying to have a child, or when you're doing certain things with your wife or your spouse, that's going to be key. God is not involved. But the key here, we see that God is involved. Verse 22, and within her the children struggled together. And she said, if all is right, why am I this way? So she went to ask, and we have the name of God right here. And we have the name of God right here. It said to her, two nations are in your womb, and two peoples shall be separated from your body, and one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older serve the younger. So this is key as well. She knows that something is going on within her. The children struggle together. The mother knows what's going on with the children even before they came out, before they were born. Instead of her assuming things and going to go ask like a psychic or going to go ask another person, she went to ask, and we have the name of God right here, what's going on. So that's really wise and smart of her. We can see that she's really a good woman. You remember when they went to go find her, what she did, giving water. She knew about the household, what's going on. So, and then we see God tells her, basically, you got twins, right? Two nations are in your womb. Two peoples. Shall be separated from your body. And one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older serve the younger. So we see there's going to be a difference between the two. Not all are made equal, all right? So one may be stronger than the other may be weaker than the other, vice versa. So that's how that goes with that. If you're wondering why your kids do not all look the same, it's by God's design. You know, they're not the same. You know, they're different. So everyone has a different personality. So even twins. Now as we go here, verse 24, and when the days were filled for her to give birth, and see, twins were in her womb. See that? It talks right here, two peoples, two nations. And when the days were filled for her to give birth, talks about giving birth here, something women do. And see, twins were in her womb. Interesting. Verse 25. And the first came out red all over, like a hairy garment. So they called his name Esau. That's key. Her firstborn, that's how he came out. Red all over like a hairy garment. All right, verse 26. And afterward, his brother came out with his hand holding on Esau's heel. So his name was called Jacob. And Yishak was 60 years old when she bore them. Now, this is another key part. Look how long it took from the birth of these twins. When he prayed and asked God, remember back down here, he prayed and asked God, said he was 40 years old. 40 years old. Now, 20 years later, that's a lot of practice. 20 years later, Yishak was 60 years old when she bore them. So we know that how long it takes to make a child was like 9 months. Sometimes it can be shorter with premature children. And sometimes complications can make it go longer. It could go up to 10 months, just depending on what's going on. But the key here, 20 years before they had children. That's a lot of time, so don't give up. You know, they didn't give up. They just kept going at it, kept practicing, kept seeing what was going to happen, and it happened. And it wasn't until 60 years old. That's old to us, but that calls for staying in shape. All right, you can't have a child unhealthy and expect everything to go right. I'm pretty sure they stayed in shape. Remember, he said he had all his inheritance from his parents. All right, so that's key. Verse 27, and the boys grew up, and Esau became a man knowing how to hunt, a man of the field, while Jacob was a complete man, dwelling in tents. And Yishak loved Esau because he ate of his wild game, but Ribkah loved Jacob. All right, so again, we see the separation. All right, we see the two differences. One was loved more by the mother, which was the younger one, and Esau was loved more by his dad. He was the older one, right? because of his wild game. He ate his wild game. He must have been able to cook. He knew how to hunt, right? So maybe, just the things that he was catching, the food that he was catching, it just made sense to him, and it was just good, But why did Rebecca love Jacob? All right, so we talk about Jacob, and Jacob cooked the stew, and Esau came in from the field, and he was weary. So we're gonna leave it at there. We're gonna just stop there, but we see Jacob can cook. All right, so his mother may be teaching him things that Esau's not, because Esau is more out. He's that child that's gonna be out getting dirty, out doing rough stuff. He has to be strong if he's hunting animals, right? So he's probably bigger and all those things. But we see Rivka love Jacob, so oftentimes the smaller male child is more closer to the mom. I don't know why, but obviously sometimes the dad is always bigger within the family. You probably have your dad is the biggest, and then you got your son being the next, coming out like the dad. So the one that's more like the dad or does things the dad loves more is going to have a better relationship than the one for the mother. So we see what type of woman she is, right? It talks about how they found her. It was confirmation from God. And then now we're going to see what's going to take place in a few more series as we bring up more about Rivka and her importance. And then in the men's series, if you continue to follow along, we'll talk about more about Yishak and Esau, the things that's going on. This scripture right here just kind of just leads you in like a cliffhanger. If you want to go read more about what's going on between the two brothers, you can go ahead and do that. But we see the importance here. Don't give up with childbearing, especially if you're having difficulty getting pregnant, things like that. Just keep working at it. Just keep building love. Just keep building your experience, your knowledge, getting wiser, just learning things that you need to prepare for when you have a child, so that when you come out, they're not lacking. Having enough money to, go through labor and pay those expenses, so that you don't have to go in and then they do a half job because they know they're not getting paid for it. It's just like free work. All right. So have that money saved up. So when you go in, you can pay the hospital right away. Boom, boom, boom. No complications. Get in and out. It costs money. Right. So again, the last video we have, the importance of money, is going to take a lot of money to have children the way you want it to happen. And also having gifts for your children and things like that. So that's going to be important. But we see we're going to get into key points as well. She didn't go to other people or allow other people to influence, her thoughts or things like that. She went directly to God and asked her what was going on. So that's one key in finding a woman that's, serving God and believing in God and trusting in God first before going to anyone else. All right. God bless.